I'm Marjorie Dannenfelser, the president of the Susan B. Anthony List. I am your moderator for this press conference today on a very, very important day. A very important day. This is the most important piece of legislation on the abortion issue that has been debated in the Senate, will be debated in the Senate, in 40 years. The most important piece since Roe versus Wade, in other words. And why is that? Well, it's been extreme. There have been many, many important debates all along the way in many legislatures across the country, including the House and the Senate. All of those measures have been very good measures. They have protected women, they've protected children, but they have all regulated around the baby. They have discussed in what manner can we kill the child, who will pay for the killing of the child, whose permission must we seek and get before the child is aborted. Those are important questions that must be addressed. This one speaks to the humanity of that boy or girl who is waiting to be born in just a few weeks. And that makes this very different. That addresses the humanity of this child who is waiting to be born to another beautiful human being, her mother. So this bill protects them both. This bill would put us in a different category when signed by a pro-life president. This bill would put us out of the League of Nations who have refrained from protecting children after that point. We are one of only 7 nations that have refrained from protecting children after 20 weeks. We are in the company of China, North Korea, Vietnam, and others. That is not the human rights club we would like to be in, and we need to be out. Thank goodness that we have Senator Lindsey Graham, perfectly suited to this moment for a whole variety of reasons. Because of his sharp mind, because of his good humor, even in the middle of a debate like this, for his desire to take on this debate in a way that really no one else has. He is the man for this moment. He is the one who is introducing this bill today with an enormous number of co-sponsors, original co-sponsors. I'd like to thank him from the entire pro-life movement. And thank you for answering the call to be that person who is the ideal man to take this on. One of the things that I've always said about him, and I'll say it here, I have never seen anyone surpass Senator Graham's ability to see the strategic moment and seize it. Because we're just going to have to say on this abortion issue, there is certainly a deep moral question. There's also an important strategic question that we are asking the nation, and that is transcending party, transcending gender, transcending ethnicity, transcending age. Is there a point where we can come to common ground and come together on this? Senator Graham has proved to be the person who brings those groups of people together over and over and over again, and there's no better place to do that, no more important place than this one. So, Senator Graham, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you all very much. Well, that was a very good introduction. I got a lot to live up to. I will do my best. At the end of the day, I think America needs to have a discussion among herself. Who are we in 2015? What kind of nation do we want to be? What kind of value set do we have? When you balance interests, where do you come out at abortion on demand of a pregnancy that's 20 weeks along, 5 months? And everything mostly in politics is balancing interest. And here's what I hope to achieve. I hope to have a discussion in America as to when do you become who you are? If you have a soul, when do you have it? At what point in time is it appropriate for the government to step in and provide protections to the most vulnerable people in society, the unborn? Here's what I believe, that as we have this debate, and as we inform the American people of what we're trying to achieve here, they will come to us in large numbers. And the only people who will object to this, I think, will be the ones who believe that abortion on demand, anytime, anywhere, is the only right answer. All I can say is that we're one of 7 countries in a pretty exclusive club that I would like to get out of. I hope that we can, as Americans, understand this is a very defining moment in our history, who we are and what we believe. So this legislation is groundbreaking but simple at the same time. What I love most about this piece of legislation is how simple it is. Do you believe that at 20 weeks in the pregnancy, 5 months, when medical encyclopedias are encouraging young parents to sing to their child because they can begin to recognize your voice, that this is a stage in development where you should be very excited because your child is well on their way? Does the government have a legitimate, compelling interest to protect that baby? The answer, I believe, is yes. And here's the theory of the case. Roe v. Wade was about medical viability. Roe v. Wade acknowledges that there is a compelling state interest in protecting the unborn child at the point of medical viability. I would argue that since 1973 to now, that standard has probably changed. But we're coming up with a new standard, which I think is very compelling. The standard of medical practice today in America is that if you operate on an unborn child at 20 weeks, what happens fairly often, because we can do operations on the unborn child to correct defects and to literally save their lives, you have to provide anesthesia to the baby because they're capable of feeling extreme pain. So here's the choice for America. If a doctor is required to provide anesthesia to the child to help save his life because they feel pain in the process of being operated on, is it okay for society to say, well, at that stage in the pregnancy, we don't want the operation to be an abortion? I believe that most Americans will say yes. We don't want 20-week abortions on demand. We want out of this club. The House passed the bill 242 to 184. There are exceptions in this bill for the medical, for the life of the mother, to save if it's a choice between the unborn child and the mother's life. We understand that the balance goes to saving the mother's life. If you have to pick and choose, but you should have to pick and choose, you should be clear that there's a choice here. It's a terrible choice to have to make. But if it comes down to that choice, we'll leave it up to the family. Now, we're talking about 5 months in the pregnancy. If there's a claim of a pregnancy by rape or incest, all we ask is that that claim be reported to a counselor or medical doctor. It doesn't have to be reported earlier, but it does have to be reported 48 hours, a waiting period, before you make the decision to go forward based on a claim of rape or incest pregnancy at 5 months. To me, that is a very reasonable position to take. So what I hope to do is to create a debate that's been long overdue in this country about when you become a person, when you have a soul, if you believe you have one, and if the government can't stand up and be counted here, when can the government stand up and be counted? If this is not worthy of a debate of a great nation, what would be? Determining when life begins and how it ends, I think, is a governmental function. And under the construct of Roe v. Wade, the government can regulate abortion when the unborn child has become medically viable. The question for the country is, do you want your government to be there for a child in the 5th month who is well on their way to being a part of society? Do you want to protect that baby from abortion? Except in very rare cases. And the theory of the case is the reason we want to protect that baby is that they're well on their way to becoming viable. They're well on their way to becoming part of who we are. They're already, in my view, a part of who we are. And what I want to do is to make the American people think long and hard about wholesale abortions at 20 weeks. Here's where I'm firm. This does not make us a better nation. This is not the America that I yearn for. I yearn for America that cares about people at all phases of life. And at 20 weeks, you've achieved a milestone. And if I have anything to say about it, we're going to fight for you at 20 weeks. We're going to fight for you at 2 years, and we're going to fight for you at 100. We're going to be there fighting for the concept of life in a balanced way. How many votes we get, I don't know. But Margie, here's what I will predict. Over time, we will win. The more the American people understand what we're trying to do, the larger the numbers in support of what we're trying to do. 13 states have enacted laws similar to this. To my friends in the pro-life community, this is a good cause. This is the right thing to do. We're going to have this debate without animosity, with joy in our hearts, and we're going to have a discussion about who we are as a nation in 2015. And I don't know when that day will come, but there will be a day when this bill is signed in law, and there will be babies who will benefit from this. And every child that is saved is a blessing. Thank you very much.
Speaking as a former 20-week baby, thank you. I understand, Tony, you have a plane to catch, and Senator Graham has invited several leaders of pro-life organizations to speak, and you're up first.
Thank you, Marjorie. Senator Graham, I want to thank you for your leadership and for your colleagues on your commitment to bring America into line with the vast majority of other nations that respect human rights and respect human life. America is only one of only 7 nations in the world who allow abortion at any time for any reason after the 5th month. As far as human rights go, the fewer things America has in common with the evil regimes of North Korea and China, the better. And it's time for us as Americans to leave this club of 7. And for me, this is a personal issue. This is the reason 20 years ago I left the field of law enforcement and became involved in the political arena, is over the issue of life. If there's one thing worth fighting for, it is the right to life. And last month, large part due to the diligence and commitment of many here in this room today, we celebrated a great victory in the House when the Paine bill was passed overwhelmingly on the 2nd anniversary of the conviction of the infamous abortionist Dr. Kermit Gosnell for his crimes against not just babies, but their mothers as well. Remember, abortion is not just about ending the life of a baby. In many cases, it's about robbing the future of a mother. The brutality of what Dr. Gosnell did is underscored by the fact that many of the babies that he killed outside the womb by what he said snipping their spinal cords would have experienced the same excruciating pain if killed while still in the womb. Now, I'm going to say for the Family Research Council, we wholeheartedly support this measure and will work with Senator Graham and his colleagues to pass this bill. And we agree with President Obama on what he said earlier this week here in Washington, D.C., when he spoke before the Catholic Health Association. He said this, quote, "A shared belief that every human being made in the image of God deserves to live in dignity, that all children, no matter who they are or where they come from or how much money they were born into, ought to have the opportunity to achieve their God-given potential," end quote. Well, that potential, that opportunity, it begins with life. So I call upon President Obama and his party to withdraw their opposition to this bill, and I call upon him to pledge his support for this measure that would help bring his administration's policies in line with his political rhetoric. Marjorie, thank you.
Tony Perkins, thank you for your voice. I want to introduce next Carol Tobias, the president of National Right to Life. National Right to Life's casting this in terms of pain is vital. It was vitally important. It began in Nebraska, and it helps us all understand what this debate is actually about. So thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Marjorie, and good morning. I am Carol Tobias, president of the National Right to Life Committee, the National Federation of State Right to Life Organizations. You've been handed a much longer statement than I'm going to give this morning, but that will also be available on our website at nrlc.org. I am proud to stand here today to offer our strong support for the legislation that Senator Graham is introducing today, the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. This legislation would generally protect unborn children from abortion beginning at 20 weeks after fertilization, which is 22 weeks of pregnancy, a point by which, if not earlier, there is substantial medical evidence that the unborn child can feel pain. Public opinion polls show that by lopsided margins, Americans support prohibiting abortion at least by this stage in development. Yet those of us seeking to advance this legislation face some formidable obstacles, and I would like to discuss one of those this morning. We see a willingness on the part of many journalists to repeat unskeptically and often to adopt as simple fact pronouncements from special interest groups such as the Planned Parenthood Federation of America and the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists on any point that might be cast as a medical or science question. On January 14th of this year, Dr. Hal Lawrence, the Chief Executive Officer of ACOG, held a conference call to educate journalists. Politico reported, Lawrence said that less than 1% of all abortions occur after 20 weeks, but those that do are mostly situations where the life of the mother is at risk or there are severe medical complications. The best available evidence suggests that the great majority of abortions performed in the late second trimester are not performed because either mother or baby faces an acute medical crisis. Yet Lawrence's claim is reported as fact. On the day of the House debate, May 13th, Lawrence held another conference call to educate journalists. Lawrence attacked the lawmakers who claimed that at the point that this bill would prohibit abortions, many babies born prematurely survive long-term. Lawrence said that claim was, quote, quite simply wrong, end quote. There was no evidence anywhere of a 20-week fetus surviving, Lawrence proclaimed. The Washington Post fact-checker concluded that Lawrence is incorrect when using the definition in the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. So in a conference call called for the specific purpose of attacking this bill and smearing the bill's proponents as purveyors of mythology, it was the head of ACOG that was distributing misinformation. It is common to read in stories about this legislation and similar bills at the state level that medical experts say that unborn children do not have the capacity to experience pain at 20 weeks fetal age. Which experts are those? The voice of authority most often quoted is ACOG. In the January 14th conference call, Lawrence said, there is no evidence that there's any fetal pain until you get past the 23 or 24-week gestation. No evidence? Consider the 10-page affidavit submitted to a federal court and accepted as expert testimony written by Professor Kanwaljit Anand, whose work on the pain capacity of premature infants transformed the pain control practices in our nation's neonatal intensive care units over the past 2 decades. Dr. Anand wrote, "It is my opinion that the human fetus possesses the ability to experience pain from 20 weeks of gestation, if not earlier. And the pain perceived by a fetus is possibly more intense than that perceived by term newborns or older children. Moreover, there are many, many pages full of citations from peer-reviewed studies in support of the various specific findings in the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. In the light of this body of documentation, the repeated statements by ACOG that there is no evidence reflects willful ignorance at best. Given ACOG's track record, it is long past time that the news media stop treating ACOG as the voice of authority on such matters. Sometimes it might help to step back and see if a claim seems plausible on its face. Consider that it is now commonplace to see features on TV or read stories about how unborn children, by 20 weeks fetal age, respond to many forms of stimuli, as Senator Graham mentioned, including music and the mother's voice. We read stories of surgeries performed on unborn babies in the womb during the second trimester who are, first of course, thoroughly anesthetized. Yet ACOG and Planned Parenthood ask you to take their word that these babies, and even babies many weeks older, remain blissfully insensible to the powerful grasping tools that are introduced into the uterus as their arms and legs are being torn off by brute force. As this bill moves forward in the Senate, we ask that serious journalists stop serving as amplifiers for such misinformation. Thank you.
Charmaine Yost, President of Americans United for Life, the legal arm of the pro-life movement.
Thank you, Marjorie, and thank you all for being here today. Senator Graham, I want to especially thank you for your leadership on this and for all of the senators who are standing with you in this really important and historic moment. As we stand here today, men and women together, we are standing in a long civil rights tradition. And I know that many of you, like me, were deeply inspired by this season's movie depicting the events in Selma, where Martin Luther King is sitting in the jail cell in Selma, and he's having a low moment, and he says, "What happens when a man stands up and says, 'Enough is enough'? What happens when a man stands up and says, 'Enough is enough'?" Well, today, we're here today as men and women standing together in a civil rights tradition to say, enough is enough. Man's inhumanity to man is nothing new. But in America, we have a very old and wonderful tradition of standing against that inhumanity. It is inhuman. It is inhuman to inflict this kind of pain on unborn children. It is inhuman to treat women who are in crisis as a profit center for a billion-dollar business. How long will we, as Americans, stand and say, in this wing of the hospital over here, we'll operate to save a 5-month unborn baby and give them anesthesia while we do it, and then look the other way, where right in another wing, we are destroying a baby at exactly the same age? How long will we look away from that? How long? How long will we continue to ignore the harm that women experience inside these so-called abortion clinics? At 5 months pregnant, when you're visibly and clearly pregnant, you are 35 times more likely to die as a woman inside an abortion clinic than you were in the first trimester. How long will we ignore the harm of abortion to women? Today is the day. Today is the day. Today is this day that we stand and say, no more.
Our last leader, the last shall be first, and we know that. Penny Nance, the president of Concerned Women for America, speaking for women across the country who support this bill.
Good morning. I'm Penny Nance. I'm the CEO and president of Concerned Women for America. We're the nation's largest public policy women's organization. We have about 400 chapters around the country, 20 college chapters, and we are so grateful to you, Senator Graham. This is a great day. This is an important day. I'm going to take us a little stroll back in time on this Throwback Thursday. Let's go back to January of 1973. Carly Simon had the #1 song, You're So Vain, which you could listen to on your state-of-the-art 8-track tape player. Gas prices spiked at 42 cents a gallon. The average home price was $29,900, and the average income was about $13,000 a year. In the field of medicine, they were so excited about a new advancement called the insulin pump. Wow, this great new gadget was going to be amazing to medicine. And at the time, they still operated on babies, newborns, without any anesthesia. In fact, they continued that practice in some cases through the 1980s. This is according to the New York Times. Your guys, not mine. Unfortunately, there's still pain deniers out there. There's still people who do not recognize that babies feel pain in utero at 20 weeks. And they're fewer and farther between. And as time progresses, we'll be laughing at that as well. So much has changed. Polling has changed. Today, 64% of people believe that abortion in the second trimester should be illegal. And a whole 80% are concerned about the third trimester. The bottom line is this. The world is very different since Roe v. Wade. Medical science has shown us that the invention of the sonogram is an important scientific tool, and we can see that a baby is not a clump of cells. And anyone who says differently, they're the flat earthers when it comes to science. No, a baby at 5 months clearly has a beating heart. She has all of her major organs. She can hear and respond to her mother's voice. She can clap her little hands over her ears in response to a loud noise. And she can feel pain. She deserves our legal protection. She is part of our human family. And we urge Senator McConnell to bring this bill to the floor as quickly as possible. We are ready in this country. We have the data. We have the science. We need to protect children. Thank you.
Thank you. We will entertain questions that from anyone, and I imagine you'd like to hear from Senator Graham, probably most of all. Sorry.
Okay, no good.
Okay.
Far away.
Hi, Justin Siggins with LifeSite News. You talked about legal theories. As I understand it, courts across the country are overturning state-based 20-week bans. Do you think that your bill can withstand constitutional muster given these court decisions?
Absolutely. I think science is on our side, and I think law will be on our side, and I welcome the debate. And the only way you can have a hearing at the highest level of the land is to get this bill through the Congress. And I really do believe, yes, that the science is on our side, that there's a compelling state interest available to legislative bodies to protect children who can feel pain at 5 months, and that will be upheld as a reasonable thing for a legislative body to do to protect a child at 20 weeks. Yeah.
Senator, Bill Cunningham with the Washington State Examiner. I have two questions. The first is, do you have any word from Senator McConnell on when this might be?
He is very favorable to this bill. I think he's a co-sponsor, and we'll find time on the calendar. I can promise you a debate in 2015 and a vote.
The other question I had was, you were talking about viability, and so this bill would draw the line at 22 weeks gestational age. But there's still a lot of question in the medical community as to whether that actually is a point of viability.
Yeah, we're not using the theory of medical viability to advance the cause here. We're saying there's a compelling state interest to protect an unborn child who can feel pain. That if the medical community routinely uses anesthesia to help save the child's life, they've reached a developmental age here where the state has a interest to say, no, you can't abort the baby.
But if that's the Roe v. Wade standard, how do you have confidence that this would be upheld by the Supreme Court?
Well, what we're trying to do is create, for legislative bodies, a new way to protect the unborn. That's the whole point of this, is that the medical viability is not what we're hanging our hat on here. We're hanging our hat on the fact that medical science since 1973 has advanced in many areas, and this is one area where it's advanced, that the child at 20 weeks can feel pain, that the standards for the most part in the medical community is to provide anesthesia, and that gives the state a legitimate interest in protecting that child from just wholesale abortion.
In the back.
Hi, JC there from World Magazine. I was curious about, this morning in Politico there was a story about how you're causing trouble for your colleagues maybe in difficult races. Can you talk about why? I assume you disagree with that. So can you talk about why?
Well, don't get in politics if you don't want to talk about things like this. You're in the wrong line of business. I mean, this is why you want to get elected, I think. Whether you're for it or against it, this is something worth talking about. And I am confident that if somebody wants to side with us and stand up in front of any audience in the country and say, here's why I want to stop abortion on demand, why I want to get out of an exclusive club of 7, that at 20 weeks, 5 months into the pregnancy, I want to stop abortion on demand for the reasons I just articulated, that if you can't sell that as a reasonable position, you're probably going to get beat anyway.
Suzanne LaFranchi, EWTN. Senator, if you look at the big picture of the overall strategy, obviously we're trying to chip away at abortion. Now we're trying to move to 20 weeks. You know the president will not sign this into law. What is the overall strategy?
Well, I think the overall strategy is to always speak for the unborn in a responsible manner. She gave a good list of what I graduated high school in 1973. I promise you a lot's changed in my life, like 30 pounds worth. And a lot slower. So the bottom line is that we're taking the medical data that exists and we're trying to find a new way to stop what we think is a procedure out of sync with America and who we are. And as medicine develops further, we'll seize those moments too.
Hi, Tierney Smith from Talking Points Memo. Back to the legal strategy. Assuming the Supreme Court agrees with you and upholds this new standard,
Sure.
What does that mean long-term for your movement?
Well, I think it's just something we should all be proud of in the pro-life community. But I think that a lot of pro-choice people say, okay, 64% of the people are not pro-choice or pro-life. What you're doing is you're seeing people in the middle saying, okay, I'm with you here. I don't see the upside of wholesale abortions at 20 weeks. I get what you're saying. This is not the right thing to do. I don't want to be in this club of 7. So at the end of the day, I think what it says is America is thinking about the baby. This is no longer an academic debate, that we got the American people to focus on the baby. This is about the baby without animosity to anybody else. So from my point of view, it is a giant step forward, not just for the pro-life movement, but for America in general. I just think we'll be a better nation if we do not embrace wholesale abortion on demand at 5 months into pregnancy.
But in terms of legal precedent?
Well, I think it's just another theory that will be upheld by the courts to allow legislative bodies to protect the unborn child. A sound legal theory, a legal theory based on medical advancements. I got one more question. I got to go.
Sam Smith, Christian Post. Even if this bill doesn't pass or gets vetoed, is there any significance in forcing red state Democrats to take a position on this?
I think if you're running for president on the Republican Democratic side, you should let us know what you would do here and why. I think if you're in the House or the Senate, voting on this issue is required because it's an important issue to most of us here, is the central theme of the pro-life movement at this moment in time. And what I'm looking for is a debate with those who oppose this. I want to hear in detail. We're going to have a long debate out there. We'll have a really genuine, and it will be thoughtful and it will be respectful. Tell me the upside of this. If you're making sure that in a case where the life of the mother is truly at risk, that you're going to let the family make that decision. You have a provision when there's a rape incest claim that can be addressed. Tell me the upside. What are we achieving here? How are we a better nation? What is your theory of the case? Why do we want to let this happen this late in the pregnancy? I am dying for that debate. I am going to, quite frankly, insist that we have that debate because we're a member of 7 nations that I don't think represent who we are as Americans. Most Americans haven't thought about this, and when you tell them what we're trying to do, they're going to be with us. Thank you very much.